Hazard Communication Program. Purpose. The purpose of this plan is to establish a program of procedures for hazardous chemical substance at Plaas Incorporated. Our company is firmly committed to providing each of its employees a safe and healthy work environment. It is recognized that various operations may require the use and/or exposure to chemicals that have potentially hazardous properties. This program supports compliance with the Occupational Safety and Health Administration's Hazard Communication Standard as found in 29 CFR 1910.1200 and 29 CFR 1926.59. This program has been developed and implemented according to applicable standards. It contains a list of hazardous chemicals and describes how to use and maintain safety data sheets, SDSs, and labels. It will assist in ensuring that containers are labeled and our construction and corporate facility workers are trained on the chemical hazards in the workplace. In addition, we will also provide this information to subcontractors involved in a specific project so that they may provide information and training to their employees. This program applies to all company employees involved in work operations in which they may be exposed to hazardous substances under normal working conditions or during an emergency situation. Active employee participation in our hazard communication program will result in the continued prevention of chemical-related illnesses and injuries at our company. This program shall be made available upon request to employees, their designated representatives, the Assistant Secretary, the Director, in accordance with the requirements of 29 CFR 1910.20. The Hazard Communication Standard, HCS 29 CFR 1910.1200, revised in 2012, requires that the chemical manufacturer, distributor, and importer provide safety data sheets, SDSs, formerly SDSs or safety data sheets, for each hazardous chemical to downstream users to communicate information on these hazards. The information contained in the SDS is largely the same as the SDS, except now the SDSs are required to be presented in a consistent, user-friendly 16-section format. This brief provides guidance to help workers who handle hazardous chemicals become familiar with the format and understand the contents of SDSs. Sections 1 through 8 contain general information about the chemical identification, hazards, composition, safe handling practices, and emergency control measures, example, firefighting. This information shall be helpful to those that need to get the information quickly. Sections 9 through 11 and 16 contain other technical and scientific information such as physical and chemical properties, stability and reactivity information, toxicological information, exposure, control information, and other information including the date of preparation or last revision. The SDS must also state that no applicable information was found when the preparer does not find relevant information for any required element. The SDS must also contain sections 12 through 15 to be consistent with the UN Globally Harmonized System of Classification and Labeling of Chemicals, GHS. But OSHA will not enforce the content of these sections because they concern matters handled by other agencies. As of June 1st, 2015, the HCS will require new SDSs to be in uniform format and include the sections, numbers, and headings and associated information under the headings below. Section 1, Identification, includes product identifier, manufacturer, distributor, name, address, phone number, emergency phone number, recommended use, restrictions on use. Section 2, Hazard Identification, includes all hazards regarding the chemical required label elements. Section 3, Composition, Information on Ingredients, includes information on chemical ingredients, trade secret claims. Section 4, First Aid Measures, includes important symptoms, effects, acute delayed, required treatment. Section 5, Firefighting Measures, lists suitable extinguishing techniques, equipment, chemical hazards from fire. Section 6, Accidental Release Measures, lists emergency procedures, protective equipment, proper methods of containment, and cleanup. Section 7, Handling and Storage, lists precautions for safe handling and storage, including incompatibilities. Section 8, Exposure Controls and Personal Protection, lists OSHA's permissible exposable limits, PELs, threshold limit values, TLVs, appropriate engineering controls, and personal protective equipment, PPE. Section 9, Physical and Chemical Properties, lists the chemicals' characteristics. Section 10, Stability and Reactivity, lists chemical stability and possibility of hazardous reactions. Section 11, Toxicological Information, includes routes of exposure, related symptoms, acute and chronic effects, numerical measures of toxicity. Section 12, Ecological Information. The hazardous materials used in this workplace, the procedures used to collect and maintain SDSs, proper labeling for containers, the content and methods for training and informing employees, how standard work practices will be conducted safely, how contractors and other non-employees will be informed of the hazardous materials within the workplace. Program activities. General. The work environment will be kept clean and safe from recognized health hazards to protect the health and safety of employees. Employees will be trained to recognize health hazards, to use appropriate engineering controls when possible, and to wear personal protective equipment. Efforts will be made to minimize the amounts of hazardous chemicals in the workplace and to minimize employee exposure to such hazardous chemicals. Hazard evaluation procedures. Plaas Incorporated is not a chemical manufacturer, importer, or distributor. Therefore, the company is not required to assess the hazards or evaluate chemicals. The company will not generate SDSs. However, Plaas Incorporated will always evaluate to the best of our ability the potential health effects of a particular chemical or product before placing our employees at sites with potential exposure. The program administrator will be responsible for the evaluation of new hazardous chemicals that our employees may be exposed to. The evaluation will be based upon the information contained within the respective SDS and how the chemical is actually used in the workplace. Chemical inventory. The company will rely on the manufacturer's hazard evaluation for all hazardous materials purchased. An alphabetized chemical inventory of all hazardous chemicals used by Plaas Incorporated will be made available and maintained by the program administrators. The master chemical inventory list is located in the office of the safety manager. Other copies of the inventory will be located in this program, in each foreman's manual, and with every SDS book where it is accessible during work hours. It is the responsibility of the receiving department to forward an SDS received with a shipment of a hazardous chemical to the manager of safety. The manager of safety will then reference the current chemical inventory to maintain and update the most current SDS file and to file the outdated ones. Each chemical on the list will have the most current SDS on file. SDS sheets. The SDS we use are fact sheets for chemicals which may pose a physical or health hazard in the workplace. SDSs provide our employees with specific information on the chemicals they use. An SDS containing the information required by the Hazard Communication Standard will be kept for each substance listed on the chemical inventory. The SDS will be the most current one supplied by the chemical manufacturer, importer, or distributor. The manager of safety is responsible for obtaining and maintaining the SDSs at our office. He must clear all new procurements for the company. Anyone ordering a new product will first obtain a copy of the SDS from the supplier for review. The manager of safety will review the SDS. If the product is approved for purchase, the original copy of the SDS will be added to the files in the Office of Manager of Safety. Purchase order request for SDS will be stamped on each purchase order that includes a potentially hazardous chemical. An SDS supplier request form letter will be sent out by the Manager of Safety to obtain an SDS for new products if one is not received with the shipment. We request that the SDS be sent within 10 days. A copy of the request will be kept in an active file until the SDS has been received. If the SDS is not received in the required time, a second supplier request for letter, see sample in this program, will be sent requesting the SDS within 10 days. If after 2 requests the SDS for an SDS, the supplier still has not sent the information, a letter of complaint will be sent to the Department of Labor. The Manager of Safety will keep copies of correspondence on file. The safety data sheets are kept in the following locations. Office of Manager of Safety, the master copy. SDSs for chemical hazards at our client site must be accessible to our employees. The safety manager will ensure that the employees working at our client facilities know where to obtain information for the chemicals they may be exposed to. SDSs must be available to all employees on all work shifts. The safety manager will review processes on the job site to assure hazards have been properly addressed in employee training sessions. All employees working with chemicals can view copies of safety data sheets for chemicals to which they have been exposed at the site or at the corporate facility. Office employees may request a copy of an SDS by completing a request for information form and submitting it to the Manager of Safety. The Manager of Safety will respond to the request within 5 working days and notify the employee or designated representative of the status of the request. Employees at client sites will use the request protocol for that facility. Labeling of chemical containers. At a minimum, labels should list the chemical identity, appropriate hazard, warnings, and the name and address of the manufacturer, importer, or other responsible party. The chemical identity is found on the label, the SDS, and the chemical inventory. Therefore, the chemical identity links these 3 sources of information. The chemical identity used by the supplier may be a common or trade name or a chemical name. The hazard warning is a brief statement of the hazardous effects of the chemical, i.e. flammable or causes lung damage. Labels frequently contain other information such as precautionary measures, do not use near open flame, but this information is provided voluntarily by our company and not required by the rule. Our labels are legible and prominently displayed through their sizes, and colors can vary. In addition to the manufacturer's labels, the Health Maintenance Identification System, HMIS, and/or the National Fire Protection Association, FPA 704 system can be used on containers to describe health, fire, and reactivity hazards and the proper personnel protective equipment, PPE, to be worn in normal handling of the chemical. No hazardous chemicals will be accepted for use at our company unless labeled. Original chemical product containers or packaging containing hazardous chemicals will be labeled with the following information: trade name or chemical name of the hazardous substance, name and address of the chemical product manufacturer, appropriate hazard warning in the form of words, pictures, or symbols that convey the hazard of the substance in the container, target organs affected by the chemical. The manager of safety is responsible for ensuring that all hazardous chemicals in containers are properly labeled. The manager of safety also ensures that newly purchased materials are checked for labels prior to use. The receiving shipping department and the site foreman are responsible for ensuring the proper labeling of any shipped containers. The manager of safety will refer to the corresponding SDS to assist employees in verifying label information. Employee training and initial orientation will outline the Health Maintenance Identification System, HIMS, labeling used on containers to describe the chemicals' associated health, fire, and reactivity hazards, and the proper personal protection equipment, PPE, to be worn in normal handling of the chemical. The National Fire Protection Association, NFPA 704 system, is an accepted alternative to the HIMS system. The NFPA system uses a similar rating system and would not confuse the user. No other alternatives to labeling are used in this workplace. The labeling system used for all containers will be HIMS or NFPA system and/or the original manufacturer hazard warning label. Plaas Incorporated employees shall not remove or deface existing labels. If an office employee notices an unmarked container or defaced label, they should report it to the safety manager, who will then label the container with the proper information. Off-site employees will notify the appropriate personnel at their work site. Labels and other forms of warning shall be legible and in English. If an employee does not understand English, the required information should also be provided on the container in the native language of the non-English speaking employee if possible. If it is the safety manager, it is the safety manager's responsibility to ensure that compliance with this requirement is met. Labels on portable containers. If a chemical is transferred from a labeled container to a portable container that is intended only for their immediate use by the employee who is going to make the transfer, no labels are required on the portable container. However, if the employee leaves the container unattended, or if the portable container still contains a hazardous chemical in it at the end of the work shift, the HIMS or NFPA labeling system and the product identification must be placed on the container. Contractors, vendors, and service personnel who have employees assigned to work on the job site or at the corporate facility in areas where accidental exposure to hazardous chemicals may exist must be informed of chemical hazards. In addition, they should also be informed about the location of SDS books and appropriate protective measures. All contracted employees are also to disclose any hazardous substance they will bring onto a Plaas Incorporated worksite. If any are brought onto the site, the contractor is to supply the proper labels and SDS information as required by the Hazardous Communications Standard. Hazards of non-routine tasks. When employees are required to perform non-routine tasks or a new task that may have the potential to expose workers to hazardous chemicals, the safety manager will coordinate with the client site to inform the employees of these hazards and review the necessary SDS information. Hazards of unlabeled pipes. We will inform employees of the hazards of chemicals contained in unlabeled pipes in their work areas. It will be the client's responsibility to inform Plaas Incorporated if such labeled pipes are located on a site. Everyone who works with or is potentially exposed to hazardous chemicals will receive initial training and annual refresher training pertaining to the safe use of those hazardous chemicals. Exposed means an employee is subject to a hazardous chemical in the course of employment through any route of entry, inhalation, ingestion, skin contact, or absorption, etc., and includes potential, i.e., example, accidental or possible exposure. Whenever a new hazard is introduced or an old hazard changes, additional training will be provided. Information and training is a critical part of the hazard communication program. We will train our employees to read and understand the information on labels and SDS to determine how the information can be obtained and used in their own work areas, and to understand the risks of exposure to the chemicals in the work areas as well as control measures to protect themselves. Input from employees is encouraged regarding the training they have received and their suggestions for improving it. In this way, we hope to reduce any incidents of chemical source illness and injuries. Office employees who are not expected to work with or around the chemicals will be provided awareness training. Those employees who handle or work around hazardous chemicals will receive more in-depth training. Training for non-English speaking employees. While OSHA requires that the written hazard communication program, all SDSs and containers labeled, be written in English, Plaas Incorporated will make every effort to communicate the hazard communication program in the language of the non-English speakers. Effective communication will be accomplished through any of the following methods or combinations thereof. Training over the entire program in employee's native language through the use of an interpreter or intermediary. Video presentations in the native language of the employee. Written materials, handouts, SDS, container labels in the native language of the employee when available and or accessible. Training content. The training content is organized according to the types of hazardous classes the chemicals used in the workplace. The format of the training program used will include audio-visual aids, classroom lecture and discussion, and demonstrations. Training will emphasize the following elements. Summary of OSHA 29 CFR 1910-1200, 29 CFR 1926-59, and Plaas Incorporated's written program. The names of the hazardous chemicals used in the work area, the appearance and odor of hazardous chemicals when released in the work area, the physical hazards and health effects of chemicals, and the measures employees can take to protect themselves. How to use the company's labeling system and who to contact for additional information. Where SDSs are kept and how to use SDS. Good work practices and procedures to minimize exposures. New employees that will be exposed to hazardous chemicals will be trained prior to using them. In addition, if a new chemical is introduced, each affected employee will be given appropriate training and information regarding the chemical. Annual follow-up training will be given to other employees covered under this standard. The safety manager will coordinate with client work sites to ensure that all specific chemical hazards are communicated to our employees. Records of training will be kept on file with the manager of safety and will include the date of the session, the type of session, and the list of topics covered. Attachments, chemical inventory sheet, hazardous material review, material safety data sheet, sample SDS letter, hazardous communication training record, hazardous communication learning exercise and answer sheet, hazardous communication SDS learning exercise and answer sheet. Hazard communication learning exercise. Answer the following questions by circling the correct letter. Number 1, the temperature at which a flammable gives off enough vapor to burn is called B, the flash point. Number 2, hazardous materials can be found as D, all of the above. Number 3, when you are working in an area with either a lack of oxygen to breathe or high levels of toxic materials in the air, which type of respirator may be required? The answer is A, air supplied. Number 4, if you are told that your exposure to a material requires you to wash your hands before eating or smoking, the primary route of entry into your body for that material is probably through C, ingestion. Answer each of the following questions by listing the correct answer. Number 5, when working with corrosives, what personal protective equipment should be worn? The answer is gloves, goggles, gown, boots, face shield. Number 6, what are the 3 common methods for controlling or reducing the exposure to a toxic material? Ventilation, personal protective equipment, substitute with a less hazardous material. Number 7, list at least 2 sources of information about hazardous materials in the workplace. Answers container label and SDS. Hazard communication SDS exercise. Answer the following questions by circling the correct letter. What is the name of this material? Who is the manufacturer? If this material is flammable or combustible, what is the material's flash point? If this material is potential health hazard, what is its TLV? True or false, this is a reactive material. True or false, gloves or eye protection are suggested when exposed to this material. True or false, use this material in well-ventilated areas away from sparks and flames. True or false, this material evaporates quickly, so don't worry about cleaning it up. True or false, there is never a need to wear a respirator when exposed to high concentrations of this material. Number 10, what are the possible health effects from overexposure to this material? Number 11, what are the first aid procedures when using this material? Number 12, what are the steps to be followed in case of a spill or accidental release of this material into the atmosphere? Number 13, what precautions must be taken when using this material during normal operations?